Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. It's Monday, June 9th, 2025, episode 409, Color Revolution in the U.S. and Discrimination Means Choice. It's two different topics today. I thought it left an impression, so I thought I'd at least spread the word. So I was listening to the Ron Paul episode today entitled California Riots, Color Revolution, PSYOP, and that was the title. So Color Revolution, it's a different way to conquer a country since military intervention is just not viable anymore. It's expensive, it's long, and chance of success is not very high. So color revolutions happen under the guise or mask of a democratic revolution. It's the removal of the current government, and it will often use a flag as a symbol, like the Orange Revolution. But in the United States, it seems that Mexico is the flag that's being used. Uh, why Mexico? Well, to maybe increase tensions, to put the blame on Mexico. Who knows? But the definition, as per this article that I closed without writing down where it was from, but the true definition of color revolutions would be that they are technologies for creating a coup and gaining control of the political situation in a certain country from abroad under conditions of political instability with pressure on the government through political blackmail using the youth protest movement as a means. The scheme that includes the pattern of organizing a protest movement, transforming that movement into a political crowd, and using the newly formed popular mass against the existing government as a means of political blackmail. So that's what was in the definition that I found. And in the Ron Paul episode, they raised the possibility, because other people were raising the possibility that the riots that are going on in LA, it looks a lot like the color revolution pattern. Um, so Newsom sues Trump, blaming Trump for the current situation. In other words, because of the way they were going after illegal immigrants using ICE in a very forceful way, sometimes even deporting people who are here legally or who are about to have their hearing, uh, for legal residency. It's just very messy. Uh, so Newsom sues Trump, perhaps as a setup to a presidential bid, which is very likely, while the media is calling it peaceful, which is kind of crazy, right? So you have burning cars, looted buildings, looted businesses, and the media is calling it peaceful. Uh, it can only remind you of the BLM riots from a couple of years ago, where the news guy is standing literally in front of a burning building and he calls it mostly peaceful. Uh, it's kind of nuts, right? Because normally it's the other way, where you see one isolated incident and the news turns it into something like an earthquake or, a nuclear explosion. On the other hand, Trump was elected to deport a lot of people. And as I said already, it was extremely messy how he did it. Judge Napolitano pointed out how a lot of the things that Trump was doing was unconstitutional, illegal. In other words, what Trump did, the way he did it left the door open for not only the riots in LA, but for the failure of a lot of his policies to actually go through. Was that deliberate? Maybe. I don't know. I thought he took care of all of those loopholes, but apparently not. Now, there is a debate as to whether or not they really are unconstitutional or not, but that obviously is way above my pay grade. Nevertheless, he didn't, I guess, think of the pushback. Like there was no definitive way for him to do it so that even if the courts did try to stop him, they wouldn't be able to. Maybe that's because people who he appointed in his cabinet just are also unaware that this kind of pushback could occur. Um, Again, who benefits? Well, Newsom definitely benefits, as I just mentioned. And then it might be, ironically, Donald Trump, right? So it is a kind of replace the government, but is it to replace the federal government, that is Donald Trump, or is it to replace government as such? In other words, the Caroline Levitt, who is the press secretary, right, press spokesperson for Trump, came out with a tweet and said, "See, this is why you have to pass the big, beautiful bill, because it has all this stuff in there which will assist in things like this." So I would be surprised if President Trump greenlit a color revolution in LA just so that he could pass the big, beautiful bill. I'd be surprised, but if it turned out to be true, then well, okay, then he really is not a populist president at all. But he is part and parcel of the swamp. But anyway, that it was an interesting kind of issue enough that I wanted to take 6 minutes of this episode's time, just raising that idea or possibility that it's a color revolution. For whom, by whom, don't know, but it looks a lot like a color revolution, apparently. All right, so in my memories, like social media memories, what one of the things that popped up was a meme that I wrote years ago, before I had this channel, and I thought, hey, why not make an episode out of it? I'll read the meme first. It was a posting, and then I'll comment on it and explain what I meant by it. So the existence of discrimination means that there is choice. One can choose what they want. To truly eradicate discrimination is to eradicate choice. Think about that for a moment. Having no choice, not only over goods and services, but who can be your boss, your coworker, your spouse, your faith. Are you upset about racism? Take care not to replace one with another, which is just as bad. Or we can say that some people are worth more than others. Remember, racism becomes an issue when it is codified by law and regulations. Thank your politician and special interest collective. Either hypocrisy is evil or two wrongs do make a right. What kind of justice is at the end of that road? My university is going after offensive social media posts by students. I was offended by many posts from other people, but those are probably not the ones which will be policed. See what I did there? Hypocrisy is everywhere. Remember, Jesus freaks, he condemned hypocrisy. A little bit of everything, a little bit of something for everybody, including the Jesus freaks and people who are fanatical about race dynamics. And so here's an explanation of what I wrote, and I'll kind of move through it quickly. The existence of discrimination means that there is no choice. One can choose what they want. That was our first line, first couple sentences. If there are no choices, then one does not need to discriminate. And to discriminate basically means to make a distinction or note a difference between multiple things. Okay. So to discriminate is to see, should I go left or right, and then decide which one is better. Uh, if there are multiple choices, then we need discrimination. The more choices, the more we must discriminate. Be able to tell the difference to know which is better than the other. So if there are 10 choices before you, and there are big differences between them, then you have to be able to tell which one is better than the other. In other words, making the wrong choice could have very, very bad consequences. And so you have to be very careful about your choice. Discrimination in the negative sense, right? Oh, discrimination is bad, right? In the negative sense, well, okay. Uh, what would be a negative situation? Because of skin color? Oh, okay. But if the discrimination along the lines of skin color is an expression of personal preference, then what does it matter? I mean, is it any of your business? No, it's not. So bad expressions and good expressions of discrimination, right? I've discussed this many times before, but think about this. An employer that uses bad discrimination, right? Like we'll use it, picks employees based on skin color. Well, that employer is going to lose his business, right? Because it is highly likely that better skilled workers are uh, among the people who are discriminated against, who were not hired because of their skin color. Another company is going to hire them, and they will bankrupt the company that is discriminating poorly. And we already know this, right? If you are a uh, school, let's just say, and you hire a criminal as one of your teachers, right? Well, that was a bad choice, and you should have known better, right? And so that bad choice could result in, the private school going bankrupt, right? Because it ruins your reputation. So that's what I mean. Bad discrimination is choosing or making choices without careful consideration of the choices that you have, right? That's what it is. And whether it's skin color or gender or, accent in their language, it doesn't really matter. If you are making choices on arbitrary characteristics, which have nothing to do with the task at hand, well, then you probably are going to lose out, especially in the world of business. What about marriage? You mean you cannot discriminate according to your preference? I mean, to flip it, like marriage is the most discriminatory thing that you could do because you can only do it once, in the monogamous kind of situation, right? I'm talking about traditional Christian kind of worldview. You can only marry once. So you have to discriminate well. You have to distinguish between the different choices that you have. Hopefully, you have many choices. Uh, you have to distinguish well because that person is the person who has to live with his or her choice for the rest of their life. And so you should be able to express your preference. I have said multiple times before in other episodes that the free market discriminates with extreme prejudice, bad discrimination, right? And so just let people be free, and you'll see the people who are making the good choices, who are engaging in good discrimination, and those who are not. The next line, to truly eradicate discrimination is to eradicate choice. Think about that for a moment. Having no choice, not only over goods and services, but who can be your boss, your coworker, your spouse, your faith, dot, dot, dot. So if you have no choice, you are stuck, right? You're stuck, right? So your so-called choice does not have to try. They don't have to care. They don't have to worry about anything because you have no choice. You have to do this. It's a kind of a monopolistic situation, right? So you have to ride that bus, right? There is no other choice. You have to take that job, right? There is no other choice. You have to work with that person. You have to work under that person. You have to marry that person. You have to believe this, right? You have to believe that climate change is real. If there is no choice, then basically you're not allowed to think. No one is allowed to think. You must do as you are told, which is a very authoritarian situation, a very monopolistic situation. Okay, the next line, upset about racism, take care not to replace one with another, which is just as bad. And of course, here I'm talking about hypocrisy. In other words, why is discriminating against whites okay now, but not against blacks? Codified discrimination is the racism people stress about. But, right, so turning a certain discrimination like anti-Semitism, for example, turning that into a law, well, that's the kind of racism that people are generally talking about when they say that racism is bad. And so attempts to turn a particular understanding of racism into law is the actual racism that we should be worried about. And so the anti-Semitism law that's going through Congress or that keeps getting brought up in Congress, well, yeah, that is supposedly fight against discrimination, racism, but it itself is an example of racism. Uh, and so you are codifying hypocrisy. Um, so which is why I'll always say people who make that kind of argument, they're basically saying that certain people are worth more than others. Um, Next line. Either hypocrisy is evil or two wrongs do make a right. So it was a little bit tongue in cheek there. So if you're saying, no, that doesn't matter, this racism is bad, so you can't talk favorably about discrimination or racism. Well, but do two wrongs make a right then? Right? So you think I'm wrong, but then you then come after me with the same exact attitude that I was showing, except now you have the force and power of the law behind you. Now racism is okay because you think it's right. And so I asked the question, what kind of justice is at the end of that road? Well, it's hypocrisy, of course. So hypocrisy is not justice. It's the root of injustice. Punishment or reward, because it's fashionable, is the very issue we are talking about. So right now, it's fashionable to discriminate against women, right? The whole trans in sports thing. It's okay to discriminate against women, shut them out of the what do you call it, the winning circle, and discriminate against whites. I mean, who cares about them, right? And so that's fashionable, and so people are putting in laws which then work against women and whites. So we're just setting up for a backlash in the future while we are cutting our legs out from under us. Okay. So at the current time, we are not hiring or giving freedom to people who are not in fashion, right? AKA women and white people, not just white women. But in the future, we're going to have a problem as well. And I think the LA riots is a great example of what I'm talking about, right? So for the over the last, what, 6 years or so, borders have been completely open. So you have a lot of illegals committing crimes and stuff. Now people are trying to clean up that mess by creating an even bigger mess. And whether or not the original problem is being resolved is apparently currently under debate. So we can't make hypocrisy the basis for justice. That's injustice. My university at the time was going after offensive social media posts by students. I was often offended by many posts from others, but those are probably not the ones which will be policed, right? Hypocrisy is everywhere. And I remind Jesus freaks that Jesus condemned hypocrisy. So even if you don't like what I say, I'm trying to poke at the guilt of Christians, right? Jesus, if you're on the side of, oh yeah, yeah, we got to do this, it's hypocrisy. And Jesus condemned people for it. And so if you say that you have faith, you believe in Jesus, then you can't support this kind of activity. Um, so some posts are condemned. Okay, I get it. But there are a lot of other posts which I think were extremely offended, but no one cares about those, right? So if you're connected, you have access to political power, you get to decide which posts are actually offensive and which ones are acceptable. And the reality is that all the posts are both acceptable and offensive, except they are to different people. I don't actually recall what the university was policing at the time. Huh. I wonder if it was the whole Corona Cervasis thing. Right. But anyway, so would it have justified violence against the person who posted it, right? And so the violence is, of course, kicking them out of school or, what is it, reprimanding them, whatever, uh, not allowing them to stay in university housing, something, right? Uh, but that violence justified? Other people who get wind of it and then jump on the bandwagon and say, "Oh, who is this person? Let's hunt them down. Let's do violence to them." Yeah, that's not justified. Okay, it's like anything these days. People often project all of the violence that they wish on others, which they are in fact planning. So a lot of people, whether it's the left or the right, not so much the right, but a lot of people on the left, the woke left, the extreme left, extremist left, they will advocate violence because they say violence was done to them. But of course, no actual violence was done to the extreme left, but they want to do actual violence to people who disagree with them. Right. And so this is the problem that we're drifting further and further down the hypocrisy rabbit hole. So in conclusion, we have to be free to discriminate. And the more discrimination we do, the better we will be as a society, right? Because the more through discrimination that we weed out all of the bad ideas. Remember that good ideas don't require force. But the problem is that with inflation and the Fed, it's hard to see which are the bad choices, the bad ideas. For example, not working, being unemployed is generally a bad idea. But hey, we have welfare, so you don't have to go find a job. Going to another country without a job prospect is highly, highly risky and probably a bad idea. But hey, welfare, and where does that welfare money come from? From the Federal Reserve, right? They are printing the currency to buy treasuries, which then can turn into liquidity for society. So, not a good idea. So it seems more and more that an economic collapse is required to reset this country, right? I hope not. Like, in other words, the Federal Reserve not being able to cover all of the losses in the treasuries, and so they have to bail out so many different institutions to prevent them from going bankrupt, and that will be extremely, extremely inflationary. So maybe we need that. And if that's the case, if that is a possibility, then we have to prepare for that eventuality. I hope not, though. But all I do know is that in freedom, we'll be able to find the answers, not just for me, but for everybody. And so we need to have freedom, the freedom especially to discriminate. That's it for this episode. I'll talk to you next time.